Hello and welcome to the audio version of the negotiation briefer, Red Teaming. Today, we'll be having a conversation with Dr. Paul Williams to discuss how to assess and anticipate the goals and actions of an opposing party to any type of negotiation. The practice of red teaming is a highly effective means of preparing a delegation for successful negotiations because it helps the delegation to identify and prepare for an opponent's negotiating goals, strategies, strengths, and weaknesses. There are numerous ways to use red teaming, but the goal of each is to create a better understanding of the opposing party's views. This recording is an audio complement to the written publication Negotiation Briefer Red Teaming, which is available on the PILPG website and is intended to offer some additional context to the briefing material and to share an insider's view of the topics. I'm here today with Dr. Paul Williams, the founder and president of the Public International Law and Policy Group, or PILPG, and holds the Rebecca Grazer Professorship in Law and International Relations at American University. PILPG is a global pro bono law firm providing free legal assistance and policy planning support to parties involved in peace negotiations, drafting post-conflict constitutions, and prosecuting atrocity crimes. Paul has over 30 years of experience assisting over 36 parties to peace negotiations, and today he's here to share some insights on why the practice of red teaming can be an invaluable negotiation preparation skill, and to provide a practical approach to assembling a red team and effectively using that red team to improve the skills of a negotiation delegation. Welcome, Paul. Thanks for joining.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Nicole.
So to kick us off, in my vocabulary, the red team refers to the color I've always played in childhood board games, such as Trouble or Sorry, or when playing Miss Scarlet in Clue. But when it comes to preparing for a negotiation, what do you mean by red team?
So, Nicole, the red team per se is not necessarily a team, but it's a set of exercises and activities designed to help a negotiation delegation understand the positions and the strategies and the tactics of the opposing delegation.
So can you provide me with a few examples of the exercises then this red team might conduct?
Sure. So one of the first and most simple is to simply do research on the positions of the opposing delegation, what they've said in their press conferences, what they've said in terms of earlier proposals, all types of ways in which a party may have publicly expressed its objective and its strategy. The second would be to do a negotiation simulation. We can talk a little bit about this more if you'd like, but to basically do what you would be doing in the negotiation, but practicing first. And one of the, group of your, or a subgroup of your delegation would be the opposing party in this simulation. And you'd walk through how they might strategize and what tactical positions they might take. Also draft a proposal from the other side's perspective. So you obviously draft your own proposal, but have a small group of your delegation team members draft a proposal so you know what to expect that the other side might put on the table. And then also assign a role to one or two members of your delegation during the actual negotiation to be constantly thinking and evaluating the perspective of the other side. How do they hear your words? What do they think about your proposals, so that you're constantly able to reality check and adjust your own positions and strategy?
This is interesting. I do want to come back to some of these preparatory exercises later and get a little bit more into how to be a great red teamer. But first, how is this helpful to the full delegation when preparing for the negotiation?
You don't want your delegation to have any surprises. You don't want to go into a meeting and the other side puts a surprise proposal on the table or engages in a tactic that you haven't rehearsed or practiced a response to. And a fairly straightforward way of preparing to not be surprised is to spend some time putting yourself in the shoes of the opposing delegation. It's basically, negotiations are multilateral. You want to have a perspective from all of those different sides of the negotiation in order to sharpen and enhance your ability to protect your interests and to win during the negotiation.
But to really step into the shoes of the opposing party, how do you anticipate their goals and tactics? Is it best guesses, or is there a way to understand what their underlying goals and intentions may be?
I'm glad you asked me this question because it's a lot easier said than done. You can put together a red team, put yourself in the shoes of the other party. It's really difficult. And so you need to be rigorous about it. It can't be a passing or a half-hearted effort or attempt to think like the other party. It's also important that you don't simply spend some time thinking like the other party. You need to spend some time acting like the other party. And that's why I suggest that your red team sit down, have a conversation, write a proposal, because everyone knows what the position of the other side is. But do you really? When you start writing out a proposal for power sharing, resource sharing, security sector reform, you then begin to noodle through the second, third, fourth, fifth layer of what the other party is thinking. When you do a negotiation simulation, you get into the role, and not only do you start to think like the other party, you feel like the other party. And feelings and emotions are an important part of negotiation. And to be honest, Nicole, in many instances, the opposing party is going to be aggressive, nefarious, mean, many times responsible for atrocity crimes. You want to act that way, at least for the day or two that you're doing the simulations and red teaming, because that's how they're going to act 24/7 during the negotiations. And you want your team prepared to be able to deal with that mindset and that approach in the negotiations.
So do you just pick the meanest person on your team to play this role, or is there another thought process that goes into choosing who's going to play the red team on your delegation when preparing?
It's very difficult to pick just the right red team members because you need to pick someone who is highly rational, highly willing to engage in a simulation, a role play, and is probably should be the smartest person on your delegation, because the other team, the other delegation is going to spend their entire time trying to outsmart you, and they are going to put their smartest people at the table in front of you. At least for the red teaming exercises, you want to have that be the stronger team. You literally want to stack the deck in favor of the red team for any of these negotiations, simulations, or thinking through drafting proposals.
Interesting thought process there. Going back to some of the exercises that you were mentioning in the beginning, how can one prepare to be a good red teamer when assigned by the delegation? What should they be prepared to do, and what should their thought process be when preparing for these exercises?
It's a multi-layered thought process for becoming an effective red team member. And we hinted at this just a few moments ago, but the first thing is the mental preparation. You really do need to be prepared to act like someone different, but not only someone different, someone who is opposed, presumably directly opposed to your interest. Quite frankly, somebody who's probably trying to kill members of your group or individuals that share a similar identity with you. So there is a lot of mindfulness of getting into those shoes and then getting out of those shoes. One of the faults that I consistently see is that you'll know what the other side thinks, but you really need to research so that you fully know, fully comprehend, fully understand the approach of the party that you're going to be representing. And then you need the duality of both a strategic approach. How are they going to approach the negotiations? And then their tactics that they will use in the negotiations. So you literally not only need to step in the shoes, but you also need to dress and comb your hair the way that the opposing party is going to act. And then you need to be thoughtful of breaking down their position into the multiple subparts. And we've talked about this on our other conversations that we have. Not only what are their interests, what are their positions, what are their fallback positions, what concessions might they be willing to make? Are there any proposals that would be too good for them to refuse? And how are they going to respond to your proposals? So it really is a comprehensive menu of tasks that you have to be prepared for in order to be an effective red team.
So not only understanding the substance of their goals and positions, but really getting into the headspace of the personalities and individuals who you'll be meeting.
Yes.
Sounds like a tough job.
You have to share the headspace with the evildoers on the other side of the table.
Any other tips for how this group can work together to best prepare? You've mentioned getting into the headspace, the research, being tactical. Anything you want to add on here?
There's three things that the red team should do in order to prepare. One of which is to isolate themselves from the blue team. Now, in the nomenclature, your team is the blue team, the opposing party is the red team. For the couple of days that you're doing the red team work in preparation, you need to isolate yourself, both professionally and socially, from the other members of your delegation so that you can fully get into the role. You need to prepare to win, because that's what the other side is doing. So not necessarily prepare to get to yes or prepare to compromise. You want to prepare to win. Now, the blue team, your position may be, no, we're interested in a reasonable compromise. We're interested in getting to yes. But you have to assume the other side is interested into getting to win. And then you need to check your empathy at the door. One of the ways in which red teams fail is they bring over with them their empathy from the blue team or from their natural state, so to speak. And they'll have an empathy for the positions of the blue team. In reality, the opposing party has very little empathy for your position, which is why you're in peace negotiations, to end a conflict.
Picking up on the research and understanding the party's goals, positions, and intentions. When we're sleuthing, we're looking up information where in this step of the process, where are we going for information? Does the work criminal on the other side have a social media account, or are there other places that we can be looking to really understand where they're coming from and what they bring to the table?
Nicole, you'd be surprised how many individuals responsible for atrocity crimes actually do have a social media presence. Oftentimes, they're quite frankly inciting atrocity crimes or inciting their followers to pursue atrocity crimes. They're very prolific nowadays as well, with press releases and public commentary. Although a lot of it is for show, the press releases, et cetera. You want to know those backwards and forwards. You want to use the same language, the same lexicon, the same phrases, the same trigger points that they use. You'll also want to ring up, and I've been very impressed by the pro bono clients that I've worked with, they'll ring up former colleagues who are now on the other side, or former colleagues who are neutral and waiting out the conflict, and they'll be quite candid, have a conversation, say, we're going into negotiations. We want to fully understand the position of the government or the position of the non-state armed actors, whomever is on the other side. Talk me through what they're thinking. You also want to track it. These things change. We all suffer from the fact that we learn a point of information at a period of time, and that information will change, but we'll still hold to our understanding of that point of information, so to speak, for long past its sell-by date. So you're going to want to refresh and create a modern understanding of the opposing side. And then objective analysis. There's the tremendous amount of objective analysis out there by the Council on Foreign Relations, the International Crisis Group, the U.S. Institute of Peace, Chatham House, PILPG. There's a lot of thinking that goes on out there about the nature of conflicts and the positions of the various parties. You really need to, in a sense, do your homework on the positions of the other side.
Thanks for running through that. I'm curious now, so we've discussed how a red team may prepare. When during the negotiation preparation should they come into play? Do they work with the proverbial blue team first, and then when they move into simulations, the red team hives off and does everything that we've just discussed? Or is it right away? Do they even prepare with the blue team at all?
So you should be red teaming from the very beginning. So the delegation is formed. There's a question of, okay, what are our positions? What's our strategy? What are our tactics? Things along those lines. And then you should have a conversation in that very first meeting to raise the issue of, okay, we need to fully understand the positions of the other side. And I would even say the mediators. We've talked about this in other conversations, but the mediators are a third party to every conflict. And so I would say you have to think about them as well. And then at the end of that very first meeting, you should identify a red team that at various points along the preparation for negotiations in the pre-negotiation phase will activate themselves, so to speak, as a red team and be thinking about it. And during the negotiations, you don't want to have the entire red team, but you'll have one or two people that are present in the negotiations and on your delegation who try to continue that mindset of the other party so that you're fully engaged and fully aware of how to get to an agreement, how to cooperate, collaborate, or at least not be outflanked by the opposing team.
Anything else you'd like to share, Paul? We're running out of time, but I think you've got a few more things to say on this.
One of the things to keep in mind is that not only is your team doing a red team, but the opposing party is also going to red team you. So they're going to have thought through your positions, your strategies, your tactics, and they're going to have prepared ways of blunting your strategy and your tactics. So you need to be aware of that. So not only is it essential that your team do this red teaming exercise or put yourself in the shoes, you then need to be aware that the other side has done that as well. And then the second thing that's important is you need to be prepared to adjust your position and your approach in light of what you learn in the red teaming. If you go into a negotiation simulation and the blue team loses, it's not better luck next time, or maybe it'll turn out different in the real negotiation. It's, whoa, why did we lose? And then you have to have a candid conversation of how you pivot and how you change your approach to the negotiation so you don't lose in the real negotiation. And then the third thing I'll leave you with is, in all of our lives, we always practice something before we go and do it. Is it sports? Is it driving? Is it anything? We always practice. If it's giving a lecture, being a professor, you always practice a little bit in front of the mirror, so to speak. But there's a weird resistance to practicing negotiation before you go into a negotiation to end an armed conflict. But if there's one thing you should actually practice before you do, is a negotiation to end an armed conflict. The Department of State runs a simulation for every single negotiation before it sends its diplomats. No matter how seasoned the diplomats are, they go over to the Foreign Service Institute and they run a negotiation simulation just to test out their strategy and to red team what it is that the other side is going to put on the table and the tricks that they might play. That's what I have for you, Nicole.
Thanks, Paul. Practice makes perfect. Thanks for joining us today to talk about red teaming. I look forward to continuing our discussion of best practices for preparing for negotiations in our next conversation.